Ian has said, I'm Beccy Pleasant, Head of Learning and Development for Magnox North, and I'll say a big caveat up front. I'm not here to talk about how good our learning and development is, but just the fact that we were the guinea pigs to some respect of this approach, and just to give you my perspective as to how it went, what we benefited from it, and what we gained from the whole process. So I'm just going to take about 5 or 10 minutes really to talk through kind of the process, why we did it in the first place, what the process actually felt like as an industry representative, and the impact of that for us as an organisation. And as Ian has said, I'm pretty sure some of the stuff that I talk about will be equally relevant to the colleges in the room as well, if you choose to go down this process. So last time I was asked to do one of these talks was actually before we were accredited with NEF Assured or validated by NEF Assured, so I had to say nice things about them at that stage. So we've now received our accreditation, so you can rest assured that this will be the honest feedback. Okay, so just a little bit about Magnox North, for those of you that don't know. We are a company that operates and decommission 5 nuclear power stations in England, Scotland and Wales. Quite a traditional organisation, very kind of conservative in a lot of respects, which I guess is reassuring, and a little bit old-fashioned, and I'll say that to justify some of my comments later on in this discussion. But very heavily training focused, obviously. We've done a lot of training, but mostly, historically, it had been in-house stuff that we had just designed and delivered ourselves. And that leads us on to one of the reasons we went down this route, which I guess to an extent was because we felt we had to initially, because we were members of the National Skills Academy, and as Ian has mentioned, they were introducing a new scheme, a very useful and valid scheme, which was allowing industries within the nuclear sector to be able to recognise each other's training. So historically we might have done a particular training course in Magnox, and then one of our supply chain members or employees may have moved to a different organisation within the nuclear sector but had to repeat that training. So obviously the cost of that repetition was just ridiculous. So the skills passport was going to enable us to have kind of some degree of consistency and transferability of skills and training courses within the industry for all parties to ultimately save some money. So as part of that, we felt we had to do it, in order to be able to deliver a training course at Magnox that would be equally recognised in EDF or wherever else. We were hoping that we had to kind of go down this route. So that we went into it with that mindset that this is something we had to do. So the first decision we had to make was how to apply, whether to apply as individual sites, because traditionally the sites have been relatively independent, and the thought of trying to apply as a whole company was a little bit daunting in the first instance. But I made the decision early on with Ian's advice and support, really, that actually for this to be valuable, it was going to have to be done as a whole organisation, and we were going to have a look at our processes and systems as an organisation and look at the consistency and promote the consistency in terms of what we do rather than the differences. So we opted to do a multi-site approach, so apply as Magnox North rather than as Magnox Wilver or Magnox Chapel Cross. What the process then involves is that you actually nominate a couple of different sites that are representative of your organisation that get visited and looked at in more detail, with then, in our case, phone conversations with the others. So it's then a choice of, well, which sites do I pick for this process? And I made the decision to pick 2 kind of quite extreme sites. They're in different countries, they're at different stages in their operating life, on the basis that if these 2 are consistent, then it should imply a degree of consistency across the patch. And obviously that was then followed up and validated by conversations with the other sites as well. So the first thing we had to do was to fill in the application form, and having looked at some other kind of equivalent accreditation processes, I have to say I was very relieved at this form. And actually the questions, the way it's laid out, the kind of cycle that Ian talked about earlier on, felt very intuitive to us as an organisation. It flowed, and I could see how what we were doing were contributing to all of those Some of the language, again, because we were slightly old-fashioned, perhaps don't use the same sort of learning and development speak as perhaps some more newer organisations. So we had to go through the process of just interpreting what some of those terms meant to us in the nuclear industry, but again the advisors were able to help us through that process. And I guess at this point, from being something I had to do, I was actually starting to enjoy myself a little bit. I was actually finding the form quite interesting because it was starting to encourage you to be reflective and introspective in a way that perhaps a busy day job doesn't allow you to be. Starting to think about, well, why do we do it this way? How innovative are we? What is the impact of our learning and development? You know, the sorts of things that you always wish you did, but don't always get a chance to do. So it was, at this point it was quite interesting. And obviously in going through the application form, we're having to discuss things with all sorts of different parts of the organisation to check that we were aligned. Following the application form process, which I have to say probably took, if I'm being honest, if I'd just sat down in a room and done it, it would have probably taken about a day to fill in by the time I just thought through and understood the terminology and that kind of thing. So probably about 6 to 8 hours of thinking and writing to get that done. So not excessive really in the grand scheme of things. And following that, there was a need to put together some evidence. And I guess coming from the nuclear sector, we're very heavily audited and regulated in everything we do. So we kind of start to approach this in the same way that we do with any other audit. And we came up with an evidence folder like this, I think, in the first instance, just justifying all our points. And to an extent, it was interesting because I'd filled in the form and I've got some other guys to put together the evidence. And whereas I'd probably been quite open and honest in my feedback on the form, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, the evidence was about kind of justifying why we're so good. So we had to do a little bit of tweaking of the evidence to align with the actual comments on the form. The form, as Ian has said, was very much about self-assessment. And I think this is why it differed immediately, how it differed from some of the other audits and assessments that we've been involved with. Because not only are you talking about what you do well in a particular area, but you're also encouraged to think critically about ways that you can improve. And I think that was the bit that I found most useful, the actual opportunity to stop and think and write down and commit almost to things that you might like to do differently or to improve on. And actually, as we went through the application process, we created for ourselves almost an action plan for our organisation learning and development, which we'll be able to take forward. So there was an encouragement to be honest, and at first, as I said, that felt odd in what we were still viewing at that stage as an audit kind of process. But as the process went on, it became absolutely the right way to do it. So putting together the evidence packs, we were then, the assessors, advisors, came to actually look at what we were doing in the organisation. And again, we started off as an audit and we were very quickly told this isn't an audit, this is a validation. This is meant to be, I think, a light touch was the term that Ian used. And what was great was that they had accepted all of the other assessments and accreditations that we'd got and didn't feel the need to kind of go back over all of those because other organisations have already explored and validated us in other areas. So we were able just to really focus on the learning and development area, which again I found really refreshing as a learning and development professional rather than a generalist HR person or whatever. It was great to have the opportunity just to concentrate on what I believe in rather than all of the other stuff which can sometimes water down what we were doing. So it was purely about learning and development. But interestingly, it was about learning and development, but accepting and being sympathetic to our industry and our sector. And I guess, again, that was perhaps different from what I've done in the past, which may have been trying to justify what we did against, I don't know, the Apple Macs of the world or whatever else. And we are a different industry, so there was a good understanding and acknowledgement by the advisors of what we do, why we do it, and the kind of pressures that we're on. So whereas I was probably a little bit critical, particularly I think around the area of innovation, I was thinking, well, how innovative are we compared to other players in the market, in the broader marketplace? It was reassuring, I guess, to talk to the lots of different ways, and within your sector, you know, you're still being innovative in terms of what you're doing. So it was kind of good to have that sectoral spin on this process that we went through, and yet with the freshness of eyes that were actually coming from outside the organisation and industry, because obviously a lot of the nuclear industry is quite close-knit, and people tend not to have moved around too much. So it was really good to have some ideas and thoughts of people that had actually experienced other organisations in terms of benchmarking and that kind of thing. So in terms of the impact then, so the assessment process, the validation process was again really valuable. I think what I viewed it at the end of the day more as having 2 or 3 really useful consultants with us for the day, looking at our processes and what we do, rather than as an assessment. And you know, I genuinely think I got excellent value for money in the sense of having some really good discussions and conversations, and committing to papers and things that we would like to do differently in the future. So I think that was extremely valuable, and we've ended up with I guess a validation which enables us to achieve what we wanted it to in the first place, which was about being able to transfer our learning and development to other organisations with the reassurance that what we do will be recognised by others, and what others do we will recognise, because we know that other people have been through this process as well. But the added benefit for us was around that kind of consultancy piece, and the opportunity to really stop and think and reflect on what we're doing, and have a clear action plan that we're working to for the next time we go through and get validated, which I think is in 3 years' time. So I kind of not, okay, we've passed that, let's forget about it, but okay, we've been validated and we've committed to these steps, and let's see how we can take it forward. So I think that's pretty much everything I want to say. I'm happy to take questions now if you want to, or time allows, or we can do that later if you'd rather.
Any immediate questions for Becky, just while she's got the floor? Can we move swiftly on? Guess that's your answer. Thanks, Becky. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Sard, I think, who's just